going on, guys? Zedd here, bringing you another Marvel Midnight Suns video, and this one is of course going to be my updated tier list. It's been a minute since I made my last one. I believe it was about a week after the game came out. I know I think I did a tier list after my first New Game Plus run, and since then I've done well, many runs, hundreds of hours, and I have a lot of refinement in this list. I've changed it a little bit here and there, but I always keep coming back to these characters in these places, so this is what I've got. Now, just for some context, or if you're new to, my channel and content, welcome. The reason why this one was so delayed, I intended to do this video weeks ago, but we got word that Deadpool was coming out, so I wanted to put a bunch of time with him because I knew everyone was going to ask me what my thoughts were on him. So I did. And then unfortunately my chair broke during my Deadpool stream, and so I had to wait for a new chair, and then work was everything was slowing me down, so I apologize. This is overdue. But I'm finally going to get to it. It's going to be a long one, so fasten your seatbelts. And also in terms of what this list is actually representing, this is not just a New Game Plus tier list or a Fresh Game tier list or an End Game tier list. This is an overall tier list. And I also want to mention there seems to be some misunderstanding in some of my comments. People seem to think that I don't use mods. I don't know where people got that idea from. I do use mods, and I have opinions of what mods are good, but during this list I'm not really factoring in mods, because if you start factoring in mods, then all of a sudden you start talking about best in slot builds, best in slot cards, and really, if we go down that rabbit hole, there's no point in even discussing power level, because by that point there's only maybe 2 characters that are kind of ho-hum. And so I'm not talking necessarily best in slot, free on everything, because this shit's just unrealistic unless you're sitting there rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling. I hope you get my point. I'm discussing characters in a vacuum, their base kit designs, sure, with some mod fluctuation if it's relevant, and go from there. Last thing is I'm working with some people at the moment. At the time of this video, I'm working with some people on developing like sort of a balanced pass of the cards without making anything too dramatic of a change. I've already made like a Is Midnight Suns Too Easy video. That one was good. I submitted that as feedback. I haven't seen anything come out of that, unfortunately, but I figure I have a voice, so I might as well use it. So with that lengthy intro out of the way, let's get started. I'd love to hear your thoughts below as well, but please hear me out before you start saying, what about if you get free on this and draw 4 on that? And like, no, just hear me out and let's not talk BIS mods, yeah? Okay, great. So first up is Hunter, and at this point, if you don't agree with this, I think you're just objectively wrong. Sure, in certain situations, characters like Iron Man or Hulk or characters like those can do more damage in certain situations. But if we're talking about consistency, power level, flexibility, team flexibility, mission flexibility, like anything you need the Hunter to do, they can do it almost best in slot, right? They are almost always the best character at everything, other than tanking, and even then, you have cards like Last Strike for conceal, or sorry, Last Sight for conceal. You of course have Fortify, which is a counter and block if you want to go that route. So even some off-tanking Hunter can do that just fine. I don't really think I need to spend much time on this. There's so many cards the Hunter is good with. There are so many ways to play them viably. Everyone has their opinion. I have my opinion on what the best Hunter, design is, but really there's so many ways you can take the character. Really well designed. I love how strong they are as a protagonist. It feels nice, but they are consistently the strongest character in the game. It's not even a question. And if you disagree, I'd love to know why you think that is, because I just don't agree. Next is Doctor Strange. So from my last list, I had Doctor Strange, I think, at like 3rd or 4th. But what I came to realize was, with my top tier, I'm now going to factor in the power level a little bit more than just consistency. And so I think Doctor Strange is the strongest non-hunter character in the game, not only in terms of power, but in terms of consistency. He does everything you need a support to do. He does everything you need a character to do. He has tanking, healing, damage, all the support in the game, utility, draw power, hand buffs, discards, um, AoE, single target, debuffs, buffs, you name it, he has it. He literally has everything. The only thing that Doctor Strange doesn't really have is high damage output outside of Axe of Angarumus and Seven Sons of Sinibus. But really, are you taking him for doing damage? Probably not. So he, yeah, he doesn't really, delve into the damage foray that much. Usually, you should only be taking Winds of Watum as his attack card at 1 or 2 copies. And that card is incredibly good, right? At certain heroism, it becomes a forceful knockback quick. That's always amazing. With any mod on it, it's just insane. But realistically, we could take everything I just said away, and the fact that Doctor Strange has Vapors of Veltor as a card, honestly, almost single-handedly makes him the strongest character in the game, and at least for like the defensive side of the game. And then he enables the offensive side of the game with cards like Agamotto's Gaze. Like literally, you can run this character with Winds of Watum, common card, Agamotto's Gaze, common card, Axe of Angarumus, common card, Vapors of Eltor, epic card. And that's not the only build, but I'm saying if you ran 2 copies of 3 commons and 2 copies of his epic, you already have an absolutely nutter Doctor Strange build. So he's super flexible. He pairs well with every character in the game. I'd say the only time he feels rough is when you're kind of getting bricked hands with like Blessing of the Vishanti. Right now, if you roll free on Blessing of the Vishanti, so there I'm going to mention a mod. Sure, it's a good card, but it can be hard to use. But other than Blessing of the Vishanti, and in my opinion, Astral Meditation, he literally has just some of the most insane cards in the game. Amazing character. I could talk about him forever. His passive is insane. His heroism generation and even spending heroism on the character is just he's so good. He's so good. And I think he's the best one. Really not much to say there. He literally does everything. Next up is Magik. So I had her at the end of my top tier in my last tier list. Same thing. I'm kind of starting to factor in power level a little bit more on this list because this is like my definitive post-Deadpool launch. This is it. So Magik comes in at number 3. She's an incredible support and DPS. I highly suggest you play her as a DPS. You can take her 2 ways. I've only recently come across this second way, but I don't think it's necessarily optimal, and that is running like 2 copies of Gather with a debuff, whether it's like Weaken, Bleed, Vulnerability, whatever. That's a good idea. I don't think it's the best way to play her, but if you're like a big, say, Iron Man fan, you probably don't need Magik to be running like as a full DPS with Limbo's Grasp, so you could take her that way, but what I recommend for Magik is run 2 copies of Kick, 2 copies of Quick Soul Slash, 1 Banish, 1 Dark Child, and then, well, my fingers messed me up, but 4 attacks, Dark Child, Banish, and then a Limbo's Grasp and a Limbo's Gaze, or Limbo's Portal rather, excuse me. And that's just like it's so good. It's so incredible to run 2 portal cards plus her passive. If you happen to get a Limbo's Grasp free, then obviously run that instead of Limbo's Portal. But other than that small change, the deck is pretty set in stone. I really wouldn't run anything else. She does so much damage, it's absurd. Even in the shorter missions, like say where you win in 3-4 turns. The fact of the matter is, as soon as you get Limbo's Grasp, it's just over. She does so much damage, and really, what really puts her over the top for me personally, I mean, yes, she has Banish, which is very similar to Vapors of Eltor, but it does cost 3 heroism and it can't be self-targeted, so I actually think Banish is a fairly well-balanced card for that reason. So it's not that, and it's not Dark Child either, because Dark Child can be a bit of a dead draw sometimes. What puts her over the edge for me is that Limbo's Grasp interacts with Shove, and then Kick's incredibly high offensive damage coefficient. If I wanted to bring Magik a little bit more in line, I would lower the base damage modifier of Kick and I would make it so Shove doesn't interact with Limbo's Grasp, because that alone, on top of the fact that the Deadpool DLC gives you the food truck, and if you upgrade the food truck, you get a discard, and once you use that discard, it gives you a second shove and move for that turn. So, I mean, it is only useful once a mission, but you only need it once a mission, because by that point, you're just going to win. So, Magik was already a top 5 character, and the Deadpool DLC just made her like a top 3 character if she wasn't already a top 5 character in your mind. Um, there's an argument to even say like top 1, but she doesn't quite have the same utility and diversity and flexibility as Strange, even though I would still bring her in almost every single composition. She just doesn't have as many tools as Strange, but of course her damage is way over the top compared to Strange's, and so for that reason, like her damage is just insane and it's easy. It doesn't require any setup outside of a single play of Limbo's Grasp, and you're off to the races. So get that card ASAP, and you're golden. She doesn't need any mods to work. Every mod is good for her. And like I said, the food truck just really pushes her over the top. It's kind of ridiculous. So if you hadn't really looked at Magik before and you got the Deadpool DLC, I highly suggest giving her a go now, as she's just insane. Captain America. He finishes out our top tier here. Now, if you see my last tier list, you'll know that this is the same top tier as I had before. It's just sort of rearranged. The reason why Cap is at the end of Consistently Strong is because I think 1-for-1 he is the weakest of these 4 characters. However, his consistency and reliability cannot be understated. Literally with all base cards, like his 8 common card deck, he's still an incredible character. When I was doing an only commons run, he was insane right from the beginning. Like, it's insane how reliable this character is. And what's really cool about him, just from a fun standpoint and a fun factor, is that he goes from being sort of this like utility, draw power, taunt bot with cards like Dig In and the Best Defense and Tactician and Shield Bounce and all that. And then he evolves once you get to endgame. He evolves into this sort of like AoE debuff machine with cards like Best Defense, and if you roll counter or you run the Dig In Best Defense combo, that's incredible. And then you of course run Shield Bounce, and then some people even elect to go with Spang or Shield Charge, because at that point in the game, he's so beefed up that he's generating so much block all the time with very little to no effort, that his damage can just be quite high. Now, not insane, like not over-tuned to the point of being broken, and that's kind of what keeps him in check. It's like if you want to push Cap to that full DPS brawler style, there's probably a better choice, but it has the added bonus that if he does have any aggro or his allies have any aggro, he's happy to just pull them off with Shield Bounce, and then in conjunction with the Best Defense, he's got quite a solid, fundamentally sound package that does not, like, he doesn't require really any effort or setup. He's very easy to play. He's not very strategically challenging in that you can use Cap very clearly, and I think he's a good pick up and play character. And he's just so consistent. I was a little worried at first, like, oh, maybe he's easy to play, so he's gonna fall off a bit later. But no, actually, he just sort of evolves his playstyle, and I love that. I think it's really cool. Definitely the de facto tank in the game too, so he has that going for him, and very, very good. If you're finding yourself struggling at some of the, like, at a difficulty, try incorporating maybe more Captain America in your team, or anybody on this top tier for that matter, and you should probably see a little more success. So great character. I don't think anyone really has complaints. I don't think he needs buffs or nerfs. He's just so solid, so consistent. Very, very nice character. So next up, we are moving on to Situationally Strong. We have Iron Man. Now, Iron Man, already, this is one of those characters where people are going to be like, Zedd should be top 1, but, hear me out for a minute. The thing with Iron Man is not only does he need a lot of, like, support and work and mods and stuff if you want him to be like that one-shot, one-kill character, but if you happen to get like a bricky first hand, or he happens to die for whatever reason, it's kind of hard to not in the sense of it's a challenge, but it's quite annoying to dig yourself out of an Iron Man hand grave or a hand lock, if you will. What I mean by that is if he happens to go down and you have his cards non-redrawn, you have to redraw them twice to get rid of them. You've Hellfire Beam, which you just can't get rid of, and then cards like that. Precision can take time to get down. His hero combos are so awful. They're so awful. Oh my god, I hate Iron Man's hero combos. And so he can just cause a lot of brickiness in hands. And so in that respect, he is marginally inconsistent. And so I can't in good faith put him in that top four. Now I will concede that his theoretical damage output is probably top one in the game. If we're talking about consistency, and by consistency, I'm referring to consistently high damage numbers, and his ability to just sort of one turn KO is relatively unmatched, I would say. But it's for those brickiness problems and the fact that he's sort of a one-trick wonder, that he's kept in situationally strong. Now that said, I don't play him sort of as that carry way, and I play him as just sort of a drag and drop support slash DPS. Are you running a lot of marked target, a debuff on air superiority, and then a debuff on surgical strike, and that's a great way to play him too. But I don't think that that's necessarily the only way to play him, and so. And even then, you still get the breakiness problems. You still have god-awful hero combos, which unfortunately you just can't avoid right now. You're going to get them in your deck, and it sucks. But I will say this, that like Magik, the Deadpool DLC does help in that it gives you that discard. And so if you are an Iron Man stan, I do suggest you get that research, as it'll help alleviate some of this um, clunkiness in some of these dead draws that you may get. He's a great character though, please don't misunderstand. You can play him as sort of like an air superiority debuff god, you can play him as a surgical strike guy, you can play him as a hellfire beam guy. It's entirely in your hands. He has some different ways to build him too, with the likes of precision. Do you run it, do you not? Fun character, kind of cool, but a little brain dead if I'm being completely candid with you. And as long as you build your team around him, he's kind of free, but not perfect. Next up is Ghost Rider. So Ghost Rider in my last tier list, and this is how you know it's been a while, I had Ghost Rider second from the bottom. And I was wrong because, in hindsight, I was wrong because I misunderstood how to play him back then. I didn't fully understand, in other words, I was overcomplicating the playstyle, to be frank. Now, like Magik, I was listing her deck. There's some variation there with like the Gather build. Ghost Rider, there's no variation. You need to be running 2 copies of Lash, 2 copies of Straight to Hell, 1 copy of Hellmouth, 2 copies of Hellride, and 1 copy of Pen and Stare. The only thing in there that you maybe could swap would be like 2 Hellmouth instead of 2 Straight to Hell, but I highly suggest 2 Straight to Hell. And that's it. That's the only build. If you're not running that build, you should be running that build, and I will die on that hill. Because it's consistent, it's strong, it's all of his strongest cards, and the playstyle is so simple. You use Lash to get as a forceful quick. It's an amazing card already in any direction, so let's just start there. But you have the Straight to Hell as sort of your conceal slash heal. You have the Hellmouth just to strengthen Hellride or Penance Stare. You have Penance Stare as your finisher for the likes of, say, Nest Mothers or supervillain reinforcements, things of that nature. Destroy devices, if that even works on that. I don't even know. And then you have Hellride otherwise. And Hellride, not only is it high damage AoE, but it discards the hand. Now, if you don't know really how the discard system works, in a nutshell, just understand that by discarding your whole hand, you're then gaining access to the rest of the cards you've already played that mission faster, which is a good thing. So that's the Ghost Rider build. That's the way it's done. If you start using things like Retribution, Immolate, Hell's Fury, what's the other one? Judgment. They're just not good enough. The health on Judgment is not good enough. The Immolate damage is pitiful, and it does damage to your own team. And then the Hell's Fury card Well, on paper, it's good. It's counterintuitive with running the likes of either Retribution or Hellride because once you discard Hill's Fury, it doesn't maintain its stacks. If it did maintain its stacks, then it would actually be quite a good card, and I would actually run one. But in its current design and its current state, it's not worth running, in my opinion. But Ghost Rider is such a solid, consistent damage dealer, albeit a little boring. Where I kind of get my enjoyment out of the character is using his Hellmouth as the movement tool to set up Hellride, because if you're using your actual move to set up Hellride on a regular basis, I think you're doing yourself a disservice by getting rid of Shove. Shove is just so powerful that I think you really want to try to get good at using that Hellmouth to set up the Hellride, or likewise the Lash to set up the Hellride. Um, but great character, great damage dealer. Point click, do things, heavy damage, no problem. And he's used a lot in Act 2 of the story, so you kind of get a good opportunity to build him up for Endgame as well. And so he's quite good. Now, where he does falter a little, and why isn't he inconsistently strong after saying all that? Well, it's because sometimes I'll be honest with you, his passive is dreadful. His passive is annoyingly bad. It is, he gets a little bit of max health, ooh, big deal. But what's worse is that it starts putting Drain Souls in your deck again and again and again and again. And Drain Soul in itself is not necessarily a bad card. It's just that at one Heroism Chain 2, going up to 2 Heroism Chain 3 and then 3 Heroism Chain 4, it's just not, like, it doesn't scale well enough. It takes way too long to get going. It's such a weak card right off the get-go. If the card started at 0 heroism, that would be great, and I think that's a good start, but even then, still wouldn't want it. Yeah, his passive sucks. If I could disable his passive, I would, and then he would probably be a top 5 character. But right now, with that passive, after you get a nice big turn, oh great, I have this Drained Soul in my hand, and if you redraw it, it doesn't go away. It goes into, like, it remains in place. You could see it again. And so when that happens, it just feels really, really bad. And so for that reason, he's in situationally strong, just behind Iron Man. All right, next up is Hulk. Well, Hulk's a character who I've kind of like flip-flopped on a little bit. However, I think that kind of similar to Ghost Rider, I was overcomplicating the Hulk's gameplay at first because, when I saw his cards and what he did, I was like, God, it's so boring. It's so straightforward. It's too, like, do this, then do that, and do this, then do that. But unfortunately, I think the best way to play Hulk is to not overcomplicate the situation. And that kind of sucks for a player like me. But with that said, he can be situationally strong. The catch is he definitely needs somebody like Doctor Strange, Captain America, or Nico in his party because he can be quite expensive on heroism, and if he overdoes it with the rage mechanic, or rather taking damage, it's just not good. He just doesn't really have like the sustain that he needs. And so you do want to pair him with a character like that. And so in those moments, he's quite good. And if you have Worldbreaker, or rather before you have Worldbreaker, he's okay. Once you get Worldbreaker, he's quite good. It doesn't kill whole boards at level 40 endgame missions, but it does do a hefty chunk, and it kind of like Bladestorm on the Hunter, it is quite good just as like a CC tool, right? So Hulk, honestly, a lot of his attack cards are pretty dookie other than Smash for the stun and also the fact that it generates rage. It's quite good. There's some changes I'd make to his cards. Like some of them don't make any sense. I'll give you an example. The Gamma Kick is another attack card. It's a forceful knockback on a target. The fact that that eats a rage and it has no base damage coefficient really, really bothers me. I think Thunderclap is far too expensive for what it does. I think it should be 3 heroism or keep it at 4 and give it a higher base damage coefficient. So there are some tweaks I'd like to see to Hulk to make him slightly more consistent and not so reliant on his team or mods. Because if you mod him out to say, if you're running 2 Smash, 2 Challenging Roar, which I suggest, if you roll free on those Challenging Roars, that's awesome. Or if you roll quick on one of his attacks, great. But unless one of those two things happen, he can feel quite slow to get the ball rolling. And yeah, but tons of damage. He needs about, I would say, 3 rage to really start popping off. But until he gets to that 3 rage or higher benchmark, he's pretty ho-hum. So, he's sort of right in the middle, mid-tier, but situationally strong. I wouldn't say he's niche because there's not a time where you necessarily go, oh, Hulk is the pick here. But, if you need some damage, you're a big Nico fan or you're a big Hulk fan, they pair amazingly together. If you've never tried the Nico Hulk synergy, I suggest you do. And watch the sparks fly. So he's a solid character, right in the middle for me. And that does it for situationally strong, believe it or not. Next up, speaking of, we have Nico. So Nico is a character who I really don't like Nico at all. People who've followed me for a while will know this. And my issues with Nico stem from her design philosophy. That being her RNG and roulette systems, I find very irritating. They're counterproductive to consistent gameplay, and when you're discussing highest level difficulty, optimal gameplay, Nico is just not the character that comes to mind when you're thinking of consistency and optimization. However, you can build her in a way where the RNG is, frankly irrelevant. So, I run her basically I run 2 copies of Blood Magic, 1 copy of Empower, and then Crack the Sky. Like those 4 cards, it doesn't really matter what else I run, but those 4 cards are what's important. And the 2 Blood Magics, the fact that they draw an ally card does mean that she does have hero draw in some sense, so that's quite good. But then, if you look at Blood Magic, only one of the options isn't good, and that is fast. And even then, Nico is very much an enabler character. She enables characters like Iron Man, Hulk, Ghost Rider, even like Wolverine, and she enables them to do their jobs better. And so, by running 1 copy of Empower and then the Blood Magics having draw a hero card, it's quite synergetic with those kinds of characters. And even then, Fast, like I said, Fast isn't that bad on those characters. Although it would be nice if the Fast was not there. But that's not the world we live in. She does pretty solid damage. I think she's best played as sort of a pseudo support, pseudo DPS. For example, I run Curse, I run Witch Storm, and Crack the Sky. Those are the damaging actions that I use on her. And then I round it out with Blood Magic, Restore, and Empower. Just 1 copy of Empower and Restore. And that's it. I don't use Double Up. I think Double Up is a bait. I think her roulette cards are a bait. I think a lot of what she does is more for fun and it looks flashy. She looks amazing. No arguing you there. But unfortunately, she alone is not really carry worthy outside of Crack the Sky. But in order to do that, you have to get 10 heroism in the first place. So it's not like something you'd be able to just whip out on turn 1 and win the game. So while she can hit hard, it does take a bit of setup and a bit of time. She does have strong supportive features, but she doesn't really have any CC outside of rolling Curse, and then of course getting stun. So she's niche. She pairs well with certain characters. Again, like Nico Hulk is a great combo. It's the best way that I like to use both those characters. It feels good. But you don't really want to pair her with everyone. She doesn't do a lot of damage on her own. She doesn't bring a whole lot of support on her own. She kind of does a little bit of both. I think it's wise to think of Nico as an enabler character, to be frank with you. And if you look at her with that lens, she's not too bad. But rarely do I ever go, oh man, Nico was such a reason why we won there. Like, that just doesn't happen. And I've tried to play her that way because I do love her animations. I think they're cool, but she just doesn't have those damage coefficients or damage consistency to really get you there. And then she doesn't have a conceal, she doesn't have give block, she doesn't have give resist. Like, so she doesn't have those defensive tools to make up for the lack of offensive tools. She just has resource tools to give your team and your allies more success. So, fun character. Not a character I bring on all mission types or all comps, but she is fun nonetheless. Next up, Wolverine. Wolverine is a character who a lot of people consider the worst in the game, or bottom 3 in the game. And while I also thought that at one point, what I learned was I think a lot of us, myself included, were kind of playing him wrong. And it wasn't until, people started really getting into the end game, or for me, it wasn't until I started really using him. I remember it was like my third playthrough, and I was like, okay, I think this character's trash. Let me just try to use him a ton, like just to really work it out. And the results that I had correlated with the results the end gamers found. And what we discovered was that he's a better DPS than he is a tank. Shocking, I know. But with the likes of Lethal Pounce and Midnight Special, you can, like, those two cards alone elevate his damage to the next level. And with the way that Midnight Special is designed, it can be very, very snowbally. So I think if you look at Wolverine as a DPS, not as a tank, look at him as just a bruiser, so a DPS who can just take hits, but not one who should take hits for allies. I think you'll see more success. You look at cards like Berserk, that card needs a redesign. Rapid Healing needs a redesign. But other than that, Stink of Fear is a great skill that he has, and then Eviscerate is a great heroic card. Chain Swipes, while a little underwhelming, does round out the kit in a very nice way. So, I think Wolverine's actually a lot of fun, which surprised me. I thought he'd be kind of dull at first glance, but I enjoy the character. Is he a little bit weak? Yes, but he is amazing on Nest Mother missions. And what's the other one? I can't remember what they're actually called. I think it's just Defeat the Vampires. I apologize. I can't remember, and I'm yawning a lot. Either way, the Deadpool DLC missions, he's pretty good at those too. So he definitely has a place, and the fact that he has a ton of chains, he can work really, really well with, say, if you're a Doctor Strange, Blessing of the Vishanti believer, he works really, really well with that card, obviously being chain. He works really well as a debuffer as well. He has the likes of Power Slash. This is a great debuff. You can get debuffs on Eviscerate and Chain Swipes, and those are really nice too. So in general, Wolverine has solid utility and great damage with Lethal Pounce, Midnight Special, but unfortunately that's kind of where the list stops. He's not a good tank. He doesn't have any block or resist generation. Stink of Fear is good to give yourself counter and apply weaken, but you don't really want to use it to taunt. Lethal Pounce, the only way it gives you strengthened is if you use all the hits on the same target, so that's kind of crappy. And then Midnight Special is only good if you have a lot of heroism. So he's not a great character, but he is very good at micromanaging supervillains and Nest Mother missions, on top of having that sort of DPS design. If you're a Wolverine fan, you can make him work. He's just not going to be very consistent, and he takes a lot of setup. But in those moments where he is good, on those certain mission types where he is good, he is very good. And so for that reason, he's a niche. I don't think he needs buffs. I think it's fine to have characters have a niche and not be hyper flexible. I think it's healthy. So I think he's in a good spot now that I've understood how to play him better, and I think he's a lot of fun. Think of him as a DPS who can take a hit, not as a tank whatsoever, and you will be way better off. Alright, next up and last on our niche list is going to be Spider-Man. Spider-Man actually fulfills a lot of the same roles that Wolverine does, just without the tanking aspect. So Spider-Man, right, you have Chain Strike, one of my least favorite cards in the game, but unfortunately almost a requirement for him. You have cards like Opportunist, which can be very feast or famine. If you get Opportunist on the first turn, it feels awesome. Every turn outside of the first turn, it feels like ass. Infernal Spider, while a little expensive for technically doing nothing, it does open up him to have really, really, really explosive turns. But unfortunately, that's the thing with Spider-Man. I found that he's very hard to just kind of sprinkle in. It's either all Spider-Man turns or nothing. And if it's not all Spider-Man turns, his deck just kind of feels a little underwhelming. Quick Kick is quite a strong quick card once upgraded, because it's a knockback quick that has quite a high damage number associated with it if the target was damaged. But then you look at cards like Web Toss and you go, what? Why is this 3 heroism? It's ridiculous. Special Delivery is a very unique card. It's one of his best cards for sure. Thwip, while I think is a little expensive for what it does, is nice to have, being one of the first, well, technically the first bind you get. That's super nice. But overall, I find him a very unimpressive character. I find him His passive pretty unimpressive because environmental attacks cap out at a certain point in terms of their damage, and that sucks. And so eventually he becomes like either you're an opportunist build character or you're a utility bot with the likes of Thwip up here, and then Spider Sense, Infernal Spider, Quick Kick, things like that, special delivery. And so he kind of wants to be Magik. He kind of wants to have CC, but he's not really great at either. He doesn't do a whole lot of damage again outside of up here. Up here is one of the best cards in the game in terms of single damage output. But then it's like you have Doctor Strange with Axe of Angarumis, which also weakens. So it's like, and he has a bind. Like, I don't know. To me, Spider-Man is a jack of all, master of absolutely nothing. I think he's very flexible, and in the early game, like the early story, he is great. But as soon as people's health bars start getting up there, he just does not have that punch. He does not do enough. He doesn't have that oomph. But then it's like, okay, so maybe he's not a damage dealer. But then if you look at him in terms of support, it's like, okay, I have a bind. Like that's it. That's where the conversation stops. And some knockback potential, but lots of characters have that. So he just doesn't bring the punch. Is he fun? Yeah, kinda, and he's flashy for sure, but he just doesn't do enough. But why is he in niche and not needs buffs? Well, because similar to Wolverine, for certain mission types, he is amazing. So he's incredible for destroy device missions because you can just thwip the what are they called? The guardians or the shield guards, and then destroy the device number 1, destroy device number 2, and you can win in 1 turn. You can do. He's amazing on capture the agent missions because capture the agent missions get additional reinforcements. He's good at dealing with that. He does have decent boss control as well with the likes of the whip, and then web throw if you run it as well, but I don't really recommend it. So the other issue that I have with him is like, why would you run Spider-Man when you could run Doctor Strange? Because I think they have a lot of similarities. Well, in the event you're doing a Nest Mother mission or a Defeat the Vampires mission, or like you really want to just have that whip on go, he's okay. So the fact that he in niche moments is useful, and like I said, if you run an Opportunist in your deck, which I don't, but if you do, and you open the mission with it, he feels great. But when that's not happening, I always hate having him on my team. So, while niche, he is useful. I don't like him at all. I think he's very underpowered. I would love to see more work done to him. I have some ideas of my own, but in his current state, I can't recommend playing him. I don't think he's very good. But, or other than those few niches, or again, the last time, if you draw Opportunist on turn 1, he can feel pretty solid. Okay, moving on to the one that makes everyone the most upset, the needs buffs category. First up, we have Blade. So Blade is a character who I had in front of Nico for a while, and I was humming on it, I was hawing on it, I was like, okay. And then when I was playing the Deadpool DLC, I was like, oh, okay, wait, this actually shoots him up the tier list a little bit, because now, not only is it just Remnant control, it's also, what do they call it? Vampire control, right? But I realized that I was like, hang on, wait, that logic starts to fall flat because with the introduction of Deadpool, you have more AoE, more chain, and so I kind of got me thinking more about like chain and AoE, and I was thinking like, oh, maybe you get Deadpool working well with like a Blessing of the Vishanti build or Agamotto's Gaze, and so I went down this rabbit hole, right? And what I kind of concluded for myself was like, okay, it takes at least 2 card plays for Blade to really start popping off, that being Make Him Bleed into Daywalker or Make Him Bleed into Glaive. I guess you don't need Make Him Bleed into Glaive, but you have to generate the 4 heroism to play Glaive, rather. And I concluded that for Blade's reward, the amount of effort that goes into it just is too high. Like, he has no utility whatsoever, aside of the hunger applying mark to bled targets. Yes, he does deal with vampires pretty well, but honestly, after going through that DLC a couple times now, just to like replay it and test it, The vampires are not a good enemy type at all. They're awful. They're not good. They're not threatening. They're dreadful. Like they're as squishy as wolves that do far less damage. So, I like you don't even need Blade. Like I was kind of hoping that the vampires would like not force you, but really encourage you to use Blade. And they do, but you don't need to, and that was really depressing and disappointing. So I was like, okay, you know what? Forget it. This guy is not worth it because if you look at all the other DPS above him, right? So you go to situationally strong. You've got Iron Man, Ghost Rider, Hulk, and then you have Magik and Hunter above them. All of those characters require less work, or if they do take some setup, like say Magik with Limbo's Grasp or Hulk with Rage, they maintain that power. That's the difference. Whereas Blade, you make them bleed, you get 2 attacks, it's like, okay, cool, and now what? Like, that's it. Furthermore, and lastly, the real thing that kind of did it for me was, on my most recent run, I ended up getting, what was it? It was a apply bleed on my Iron Man's air superiority, and I was like, oh. So what you're saying is, it's that easy for me to just never need to bring Blade again, right? And I mean, I know that sounds like an obvious statement, but it's like, oh, huh. So you can just take the Nanite Blade item if you use combat items, or get any bleed mod on a relatively AoE or chain attack, and boom, there's zero reason to run Blade. Because the bleed that Blade has is not unique to him, and I think that's sad. I think it's a disservice to the character. And so Bleed's availability puts Blade low on my tier list, but not at the bottom because he can still output great damage. And the only thing keeping him from bottom 1, or maybe not bottom 1, bottom 3, is Reaper. That card is nuts. Reaper is so strong. It does so much damage, and the way the interaction works is if you have Make 'em Bleed and then you use Reaper, Reaper will apply the bleed stacks, then consume them, so you're adding so much damage. And then on KO, it gives you Strengthen. Like, it's so good. But that's it. Like, Reaper is the only card of his where I'm like, this is a really, really good card. The rest, I'm just like, oh my god, why are we still here? Like, why does Daywalker cost 3 heroism? Can we talk about that? Why does Eviscerate cost 2 and Daywalker cost 3? Well, I know why. But I think that that is such a huge disconnect, and I hate it. So anyway, that's enough on Blade. I don't think he's a great character at all. I think you can play him, but I think if you have access to Bleed in other ways, you really don't need him. If you use combat items, just get a Nanite Blade if you're worried about Revenants or Vampires, and you're fine. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. And a lot of his cards, frankly, just suck. They fall off so hard. They don't scale well. Strike is bad. Relentless is bad. What's it called? Savage is pretty bad. Stake is bad. Like, it, yeah. That's enough on Blade. I think he's awful. Scarlet Witch, this one upsets me. I really want her to be good. I really, 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 really do. But the fact of the matter is, even if you get all the ducks in a row, all your cards correctly, you get the perfect deck, it still is like, eh. And now there is a build out there that's like an entirely free, quick version of Scarlet Witch. That build is incredibly hard to make because of all the free mod requirements, but if you can get her to that point, then she'd be pretty good. But as of right now, I've only ever really run 1.5 builds for her because she has so few limited cards that are good. She pretty much is Quick Toss Hexmark the character, and every other card she has is either too niche or situational. So I'll tell you what, like 2 Quick Tosses, 2 Hex Marks, 2 Hex Charges, and then 2 of whatever else you want, and you pretty much have your character. Hex Charge is niche but useful. Quick Toss is amazing. It's one of the best cards in the game. And then Hex Mark is just an AoE mark. It's hard to go wrong with that. So she's not bad. It's just the mark isn't all that useful. The Quick Toss damage isn't super high, and Lash exists. And then Hex Charge is like, you can have other cards that do what Hex Charge does in a similar way or accomplish a very similar role. So it's not that good. So, and she probably has, yeah, she has the second, no. She has the worst common deck in the game. I was gonna say behind Deadpool, but no, she does have the worst common deck in the game, and it's honestly not even close. It's just, it's so bad. It's so bad. And so getting her off the ground to a point where she feels playable with like 4 rares, 2 epics, and a partridge and a pear tree, it's just so bad. So she's just such a grind to get going. I love the character though. I do again have some changes that I would do with her, but yeah, she just needs something. She's not consistent. She's never the pick ever. Uh, but I will say this: if you are a Wanda fan, she pairs incredibly well with Magik, like incredibly well with Magik, and then also Spider-Man. Believe it or not. Just make sure that if you run Wanda Spider-Man, that you bring another sort of pseudo DPS or DPS, because then you're kind of running like support slash DPS Wanda, support slash DPS Spider-Man. You need a DPS to really round that comp out, but it actually works quite well. So yeah, I don't know, really not much to say. Really underwhelming. Takes so much to get going, and even with the best in slot build, she still is a mediocre character. So she's one of the two I was talking about, where if we're talking BIS mod, she still wouldn't be the best. Captain Marvel's next. I mean, I don't know, man. She doesn't even deal the highest damage in the game. She can't tank for shit. Go Binary is a terrible design. Photon Beam is a dreadful card. A lot of her heroics are far too expensive for what they do. Reina blows his ass unless you get game block on KO. Bring It On is her best card behind Quick Jab and Fists of Radiance. Supernova is a pretty mediocre card, but it at least is an AoE, I guess. Knee Strike feels awful to use, but almost necessary. I don't know. A lot of her cards, they're a mixture of selfishness and uselessness, and that really summarizes Captain Marvel: selfish and useless. Like that's there's not much to say there. She doesn't do enough damage. She doesn't have any utility. Other than, again, Bring It On is a great card. I want to make that clear. It's a very good card. Supernova is okay. Yeah, people who love this character, I think, are just crazy. If like, it's fine if you love her, but if you're seriously telling me she's not that bad or she's actually good, I think you're just full of shit. I think you literally are looking at her with rose-tinted glasses, because yeah, no. There's no reason to pick Marvel. She is never, ever, ever, ever the pick. Whereas Blade at least has a purpose, and Wanda at least goes well with Magik and can be built in a very supportive way. Captain Marvel can't do any of that. She's not the best DPS, she's not the best tank, she's not the best bruiser, she doesn't have utility, she doesn't generate good heroism, she spends too much heroism, for goodness sake. And even that, she only has freaking a 1 knockback, and it's a regular knockback, it's not even forceful. Like, what tank doesn't have forceful knockback? Are you kidding me? She does. Or doesn't, rather. She's awful. I don't know. I could literally go on about her entire kit. Oh, and her passive, lastly, her passive is just awful. The passive alone is not bad. It's the percentage that sucks. It's 10% at base and 20% at upgraded. The problem with that is you can never, ever, 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 ever rely on it. And she's the kind of character where you don't want her to get hit anyway. And not Go Binary. Bring It On gives you counter anyway. So it's like, okay. God, she's dreadful. Because the Bring It On gives you resist stacks when you're in binary, and then it gives you counter anyway. So it's like, do you need counter from the passive? No. She's dreadful. But our newest comer is, in my opinion, the worst character in the game. Deadpool. I think this character is such a disaster from a design standpoint. I don't know what they were smoking. I don't know. This character is so useless. He is so garbage. Now, before anything, I want to mention, people have already been discussing this idea of like, oh, but what if you get quick on overpowered and you run 2 copies of that, and then you run 2 copies of quick shot as your 4 attacks, and then you have 4 quicks, and it's like, bruh, like, really? We're having this conversation. Okay, let's go down there. So if you're discussing that concept, I'm gonna direct your attention towards the likes of Iron Man or Ghost Rider, who can do that just better. Or that's a pretty flaky argument. But let's move down the list. So his 2 skill cards are dreadful. Altogether now just starts overcapping your hand, and the fact that it's not hero card draw is so bad. That's just generic draw. So worst case scenario, you draw 2 hero combos. Hey Shit Face is awful. It's not that it's awful, it's that it's awful to use, it's awful to run. The saving grace is that it has exhaust. So you can run 2 copies, use them, and just thin out the deck with Deadpool, which is honestly the best thing you should be doing, because fuck this character. Boom Headshot, while on paper I thought was going to be really, really strong, it's really, really not, because you need the Enfuego stacks, which we'll get to Enfuego in a second. You need the Enfuego stacks to generate the heroism, which implies you need 3 Enfuego stacks to make it even worth it, because otherwise you can just run an extra skill card if you want heroism, or you can just run an attack card if you want heroism. Overpowered, I will admit, is his best card, in my opinion, other than Burning Sensation. So Overpowered is really, really nice, but Mag Dump is far too expensive for what it does. It's like a slightly better hero combo. His, what's it called? Spread the Love, I think it's called. The chain is awful. It's actually dog shit. I don't know who designed that card, but they should be fired. And oh, what is it? Boom Headshot. Oh no, that is the heroic card. Sorry, his names are. I'm still trying to get his names down. What is it then? The oh, Death from Above. Sorry, that's the one. Death from Above is dreadful. If you look at the actual scaling with the Enfuego, it's so bad. So you need to replace that card ASAP. He has one of the worst common decks in the game, only behind Wanda, in my opinion. But the real issue with the character, while his cards do suck and he brings no utility to the team outside of mediocre damage at best, is Enfuego is so hard to get and then even harder to maintain. And even once you get a few stacks, he then becomes at least a playable character. Not even a good character. That's the thing. And a lot of his cards are just ass. Like Pain Pinata is awful. Yes, it gains in size with Enfuego, and so you're supposed to use it as like a debuff card. I understand that because the AoE can apply like vulnerability, weaken, whatever. Sure. But like, why aren't we just running Iron Man at that point? Or why aren't we running Wolverine at that point? Or Magik, right? Quick Shot, one of the stronger quicks in the game, admittedly. High damage coefficient, chains, so it's very like akin to a chain strike. But the animation is so slow, and I know that's just a nitpick that has absolutely nothing to do with balance, but it's so annoying how slow that card it takes for being titled as a quick card. So like Quick Shot, Overpowered, and Burning Sensation, pretty decent, I'll admit. Like those 3 cards are solid. But that's it. I think every other card he has sucks. I don't want to take any other card when I'm running him in the deck. Or, sorry, on the team, excuse me. Burning Sensation 2 only really starts popping off at about Enfuego level 3. And even then it has to be later in the game when your base damage coefficients are so bloody high that you start hitting like thousands and thousands and thousands of damage. I've seen screenshots of people pushing 20k. There might even be more, like some larger numbers than that now. I don't know. So he's just dreadful. He doesn't do anything. His DLC that he came with was dreadful too. Maybe there's some bias there, but I genuinely think he's worse than Marvel and Witch and Blade by a mile. He does pitiful damage. Enfuego is so hard to stack and keep, and even at max Enfuego, he starts to deal decent damage. He has no utility outside of a knockback and generic card draw. Ooh. His taunt card, well, it's okay because it gives resist and exhausts. Doesn't work if there's a supervillain in the fight, so it's already a waste. And then, yeah, Quick Shot is solid but slow. Overpowered is solid. Boom Headshot I thought would be good, but it's not. And like he has 5 attack cards for God's sake out of his 10 cards. So already he's jockeying for attack card positioning. 2 skill cards, and then I guess that leaves what? 3 heroics? Yeah, 3 heroics. I don't know, dude. Like Pain Pinata 2, that card should just, I don't know. He needs better Enfuego design. He needs to be able to get more Fuego stacks per skill, he needs more damage, he needs higher damage, he needs Fuego to not cap at 5. Like, he just needs so much work. Like, he needs a full balance pass. And even the base design, I think, is ass. And I haven't even touched on his actual passive, which is he heals passively per turn. But you don't want him to take damage because of Fuego. So it's like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, what is this character? Like, oh god, Deadpool is awful. And if you think otherwise, I think again it's a rose-colored glasses or like a fanboy issue because he is awful. Like, uh, no, Deadpool sucks ass. And I will die on that hill. So, let's see. That was an hour. So that was actually faster than my other one. I guess I did skip over some points because I feel like the game's been out long enough. You can kind of fill in the blanks a little bit. But this is my take on the power level of the game. You know, if you want to have a rational conversation in the comments, let's do it. But if you're just going to come back and say, okay, but Zedd, have you tried this character with all freeze and all quicks? I'm just going to ignore you at this point because I've seen that comment happen so many times. I'm so sick of it because, like, anyway, I'm not going to bother getting into that. But if you suffered through all this and you suffered through playing Deadpool, see, I should have started with him because now I'm just agitated thinking about him. Character sucks ass. Um, Thank you, friends. And I don't know what's next on the docket for me. I found the DLC very underwhelming. I do want to do another run soon once I get a bit more free time in my life. But I hope this is insightful, and I would love to have good conversations with you guys in the comments, and I will see you on the next one. Peace out for now.